Okay, so this is going to be another unscripted, wide-ranging topic. This time kind of focused on air quality and air filtration, since a lot of people have been asking me questions about air filtration and sanitizing air and everything involved with your air quality, especially when it comes to coronavirus. And I'm not an expert on this, but I've worked enough in the HVAC business to know a few things. So, to tie into something I just posted recently about Dr. Peter Psy, what's fascinating about him, he is the inventor of the N95 mask. So, this is an N95 mask with a valve. N95, the 95 part, refers to the amount of filtration that this mask provides, and it filters 95% of the particulates. That particulates means particles in the air that come in contact with this mask. This, N95s have been around for a long time, and please read my post about Dr. Psy. He's an amazing, amazing man and the unsung hero of this epidemic. And his invention is ubiquitous. Even before the virus, this was the de facto standard for healthcare providers and construction workers. And the reason why is because this thing works incredibly, incredibly well. Funny thing about this is, it wasn't until I actually read that piece that I posted about Dr. Psy that this is an electrostatic filter. So this is the electrostatic part was a bit of a shock to me because I didn't realize how fancy this was. So to take a step back, to filter air, ideally what you want is a type of filter media. In this case, filter media is just a fancy term for whatever the filter is made out of. For filter media, there's a fine balance between how much air gets through the filter and how much it stops. It's a balance, and I'll go into this hopefully a little bit later about having too much effectiveness on the filtration part, but not enough transmission of air through a filter, because it causes massive, massive, massive headaches on an air conditioning system, which is really important right now because we're in the middle of we're actually on the uptick of a second wave of the virus, and also where it's been an incredibly, incredibly, incredibly hot summer. So, traditional media, filter media, is a piece of fabric of some sort that slows airflow enough, and it traps whatever particles and doesn't allow anything to come through. Another way of doing that is called an electrostatic filter, and what it does is, it's a good example because that's what this is. I didn't realize, and what you don't realize is if you take a genuine N95 mask, and they all have this designation stamped on it. Granted, there could be counterfeits now, but the old school ones pre-COVID-19 all have a legitimate N95 designation on it. What I didn't realize is there's actually two pieces of material that this is built up of. So what happens is an electrostatic is it's kind of what it sounds like. There's a static charge that occurs when two particles rub up against each other. The lower the humidity, the more of electrostatic charge. So that's why in the wintertime, in say most of the country, when the humidity is very low, you get shocked all over your house, particularly if you have a lot of polyester or man-made fibers around your house. You're walking around, even a shopping cart in the wintertime, pushing a shopping cart, it has polypropylene wheels, plastic wheels against a plastic floor. It generates this electric charge. You touch you ground yourself against a piece of metal, like a metal shelving at Costco, and then you touch the metal part of your shopping cart, you'll get zapped. So it's that static charge that builds up when particles rub up against each other. And obviously, you can't see that because it's on an atomic level. So what an electrostatic filter does is it creates two, kind of separates the particles, and I could be wrong, my science friends can correct me on this. As it passes through one piece of the filter, it picks up a charge. And then when it hits the other piece of filter material, that's where it gets attracted and it gets trapped. So this does a double whammy. It tries to straight up stop a large particle, but anything that gets past that, probably 5%, well, more than that, but whatever gets past that actual initial piece of media, it gets electrostatically charged, and hopefully this last little bit stops it, and only 5% gets through. Whether or not that's going to stop a virus, that's a different story, because viruses are so small. But like that's why these things were so popular in the construction industry, because you're working with very, very fine particles, silica dust from drywall, all kinds of stuff, asbestos. This would hopefully and does stop a lot of that. So back to the air filter part on people's homes, because that's what they're concerned about. And what I mentioned about having too efficient of a filter. So this 3M has been doing an amazingly well job of promoting their Filtrete filters, and they've been making a killing on that. Actually, 3M's been making a lot of money, but hey, they're not taking advantage of anyone. They just make amazing products. And 3M is, as far as I know, and I always trust 3M products. So anyway, Filtrete products, it was a brand name that they created for their super high efficiency filters, and now I think it's trickled down to the entire range. But the purple label ones have the highest effective filtration of any aftermarket filter that I know of, as far as a consumer can buy off the shelf. Great stuff, expensive, but it works. But the problem is that it's a little too efficient. And what that does is it actually limits the amount of air going into your air conditioning system. In your furnace, it's not as critical, but quick physics lesson and AC efficiency lesson, the more your air conditioner efficiency goes up, so it's more efficient, the more air you have going through your system. So the less amount of air you have going through your system, the less efficient it is. That's basically a rule of thumb. So hopefully this is not too confusing, air conditioning systems are sized by BTUs per hour, and the rough estimate are BTUs per ton. So there's 12,000 BTUs per ton. So when you buy a house, you find out, hey, the realtor tells you this is a 3-ton air conditioning system. So that's 36,000 BTUs. Those 36,000 BTUs are directly proportional to the amount of air going through the system. That 36,000 BTUs was calculated at the factory and by the engineer who designed that air conditioner to have 36 full thousand BTUs of its design with X amount of airflow going through the system. You reduce that amount of airflow, you don't get 36,000 BTUs. You increase that airflow over what it's designed for, you don't get 37,000 BTUs. You still get 36,000 BTUs. So that Filtrete filter, as well-intentioned as it is, it's too damn efficient. And I've seen lots and lots of problems as a result of people putting in too good of filters. So it's a catch-22. You can have a shitty filter that's totally clogged and it causes the same amount of problems, or you can have a Filtrete that's clean and it still causes the same amount of problems. But a Filtrete with a really dirty Filtrete causes you a lot of problems. So I was going to make a post about this later, but now I'm doing it now. What I recommend to customers is to get the cheapest filter available that fits, obviously, and change it often. And that will solve a lot of headaches. That said, Honeywell, who's another very, very trusted company and who makes great products and has for decades, along with 3M, has created this ionizer / electrostatic filter for decades. They call it the electronic air cleaner. And this is my absolute favorite air cleaner around. I'll get to UV after UVC after this, but this is like old school tech. I think it was invented in the 70s. Probably, obviously, the technology was built before that, but it was commercially available in the early 70s. And what it does is basically does the same type of thing here. You can't see it, and I can't zoom into it, but kind of same analogy of air going through. In this case, I'll go this way. So this has a direction, and so what this giant air cleaner does, it sits in a box with a very expensive, it wasn't very expensive, but an expensive circuit board that does that creates the electric charge part of this. So what happens is air comes through this, and if you look at it, you can actually see straight through me. I don't know if you can see my face or not, but you can look right through this, and I can just stick my hand through it. You can't do that with a regular air filter. What this does is this, and you can't see this, is that they're called ionizer wires. And what happens is air or dirt or any particles that come through through your air conditioning system, the first wave, it charges, it gives that particle a charge, the same thing like this does. But this does it with electricity, this does it with static electricity. So it charges those particles, and then what you kind of see are these plates, and they are the charged plates. So this creates a negative, the wires create a negative charge to the particles, and then this creates a positive charge, and all of that crap gets miraculously stuck onto these plates. And you can just take it off, pull these cells out. Mine has 2 cells, and just hose it off, let it dry off, and put it back in. These fell out of favor because of just poor marketing. In my opinion, it's still the best filter made. And back to that whole analogy and the proportion of airflow to the amount of efficiency of your system, this has the absolute least amount of resistance because air literally just goes right through this. You can see totally through it. These fell out of favor because Honeywell, and this is what I respected so much about Honeywell and 3M, is that they make amazing products, but they're shit at marketing. And so Honeywell made this. It was relatively, at the time, relatively expensive. And they were just shit at marketing it. They're shit at explaining to contractors how it works. Energy was cheap and plentiful when these came out. And so people weren't concerned about efficiency. Just put a bigger unit in. That doesn't fix things. But anyway, then around in the 90s, a company called Aprilaire, if you're a homeowner, you might know this company name. They were and they still are the de facto standard when it comes to home humidifiers. But they saw an opportunity here. People were starting to become more conscious of air quality. So they made a huge push to contractors to have them have them install these basically filtrate filters on steroids. They were cheap to install, but they're really expensive to maintain. And this is the brilliance in Aprilaire's marketing, is because they knew they could get their product, their box into homes, and then the customer basically was stuck with using that filter. Because it's a sunk cost kind of fallacy here, is that the thing was so expensive to begin with, it would be really expensive to tear it out. Most people don't want to call an air conditioning guy to tear out a filter system, and they just suck it up and just pay whatever, $70 or whatever a filter change is, which is not bad, but that's 2 times a year, and that adds up for $150 plus the guy's labor to change it out. It's a very convoluted mess, this giant filter you got to do, as opposed to a homeowner just popping in a $15 filtrate. The contractor doesn't make all that much money on it. You kind of screwed everybody. So those are falling out of favor, and these are starting to become more and more popular, which is great. That's great news because it's a superior product. Everybody wins. I've got very few residential customers, but the ones I have, I feel guilty charging them for what I have for what I pay for the filter media and the time it takes me to wrestle this giant accordion of a filter. So now we talked about the air filtration part. Now we'll get to the sanitizing part. And I've talked about this before in a post about ultraviolet C bandwidth sanitizing, not filtration, sanitizing. So ultraviolet light, the stuff we have that gives you skin cancer, or the stuff that fades paint and makes plastic brittle outside, the ultraviolet radiation outside is a great sanitizer. And there's different wavelengths of that UV light, and we designate them as A, B, and C. C is the one you want to target if you're trying to sanitize the air. And C is the one that's able to, A does the damage and everything else. C is the one that's able to break down the cell walls of a virus. And so there's going to be, and I guess ahead of my time, talked about UV a long time ago, is that it's a very simple, relatively inexpensive way of cleaning air, or cleaning anything really, that you expose the light to. Downside is again, it breaks down, the good side is it breaks down cell walls of viruses, but also it tends to degrade anything that's exposed to it that's not UV resistant. So UV resistant, that's a catch term for a lot of things that go outside. And if it's UV resistant, it has either in the paint or baked into the coloring, or it has a coating on it that allows it to not break down in the presence of ultraviolet radiation light. And wow, so sorry about that. The downside is that UV tends to break down plastics, especially stuff that's not UV resistant. And this is made of non-woven polypropylene, which polypropylene is plastic. It's petroleum based, and so you expose this enough time under UV light, UVC light, it will degrade and minimize the effectiveness of this filter. So it's not an ideal situation. But now, in the initial days, people say, A, you don't need a mask, and then B, only medical personnel, and that's still true. And then people were wondering about the effectiveness now. Now we're down to the point where just have a piece of cloth over your mouth is more than nothing. And I totally believe in that, and I totally agree with that. So, speaking on a sidebar, speaking of toilet paper on your face, cloth, Dr. Psy mentioned this, and I even read this in the early days of the virus and the shortage of the N95 mask, is that lots of people did tons of tests. And even Dr. Psy mentioned this, is that a non-woven piece of fabric, such as a shop towel, a blue shop towel, makes for a great mask, because it's so dense, because it's not woven. It's actually, and it mentions in that article, basically they spray this stuff over a matrix and allow it to cure. It's basically plastic sprayed and allow it to cure, and then this is what you have. And so that's the same thing with this. This is basically non-woven, two pieces of non-woven material. So if you are in absolute bind, get a shit ton of shop towels. Blue shop towels are awesome. Not paper towels, shop towels. And this is another funny thing is in the early days of the coronavirus, I would see people buying bleach, Lysol, not buying Spray 9, which kills viruses. That hasn't gotten the designation like Lysol has, because they probably paid someone off. People were buying paper towels, which you should, but they weren't buying shop towels, and these are actually more effective. I love shop towels for work because they are crazy tough. These will outlast like 10 to 1 the amount of paper towels that this takes. But anyway, so this is one of the best pieces of filter material you can possibly get for a mask. But I digress. So I'm going back to UVC. So UVC, what it does, how it works is you expose whatever to the light and it kills it. But the problem is it doesn't kill it it doesn't kill it with the initial contact. You actually have to have it, whatever it is, stay in front of the light. So that's fine with something that's tangible like this, but how do you do that with air? And how you do that with air is air changes. You just basically have to recycle the air over and over and over and over the light until it's had enough exposure to the light to kill whatever's in the air. I don't want people to get this feeling like, oh, if I have a UVC light in my house or my apartment or my office, it's going to solve all the problems. It's going to make it so it's a clean room as soon as you walk in. No, that's not what it's going to do. What it does is it's just an added benefit, an added peace of mind, but it is not a replacement for people wearing masks. It's not a replacement for people socially distancing themselves. It's not a replacement for not washing your hands and stuff like that, but it's another part of air quality, and it always has been and should be. Part of the air quality too also is to get the humidity up in a space, because that's just good for air quality, and the virus apparently doesn't like that all that much. And so with the UVC, typically where you want to have that, let's just say in a residential air conditioner, you want to have the light somewhere in the airstream, obviously. The benefit of the light, like I said, is it kills whatever kills whatever is in contact with it over a duration of time. So in your air conditioner, where the actual cooling part takes place inside the house, let's just say, or apartment, it's called the evaporator coil. And what happens is that's what cools your space down, and also dehumidifies. And that moisture actually can become a breeding ground for bacteria. So a win-win, killing two birds with one stone way of best place to install a UV light is to have it somewhere near the evaporator coil, because what that does is all air has to go through that all air has to go through that evaporator coil, and if it's going through the air, you might as well have a light over it, so that can kill whatever mold and whatever stuff that's growing on your coil from the moisture, and it kills the viruses that might happen to be in the air, or bacteria that's in the air. So it's doing a two-prong attack. Attack there. So that's what how I have it mounted at my house, is that you have the furnace down here and it's blowing the air up through this evaporator coil, and I just have the light sitting up here. In theory, this would cut down on the amount of clogs you have in your drain system from that bacteria. And if you've ever cleaned out the sludge that comes out of your air conditioner, you'd know what I'm talking about. And true story, my UV light, I've had one for a long, long time. It died, and I hadn't had a chance to replace it. And I started getting more and more clogs, and I'm 99% sure it's because the UV light died. Or to go back, a UVC bulb is only effective for X amount of hours that it runs. And so rule of thumb, replace it every 6 months. Not super expensive. Maybe not so much homeowner type thing to do, but it is well worth whatever expense it is to replace it. But like I said, it has X amount of run time. If you don't run the fan all the time and have the light on all the time, you should be able to get at least 6 months out of it. That's it. In my case, I started getting more and more clogs on my air conditioner when I didn't have any before, and I think honestly it's because the UV light was dead. I'll have to go back and double check that. I've been meaning to do it this summer, but been a little bit busy. So to end a very long video, and again another very long video, that's all I got right now about air filtration. I'm sure I have a bit more to share, but I can't think of anything else, because that covers the hot topics. Any questions, just give me a call, or not give me a call. Don't call me, message me. Thanks.